This is episode 85 of Ethics and Culture Cast from Notre Dame's Nicola Center for Ethics and Culture. Welcome to episode 85 of Ethics and Culture Cast from the Nicola Center for Ethics and Culture at the University of Notre Dame. I'm Ken Hellenius, the communications specialist at the center. In this episode, we chat with Jennifer Newsome Martin, associate professor in the program of liberal studies with a joint appointment in the Department of Theology and, as of July 2024, the new director of the Nicola Center. We chat about her first semester in the director's chair, our recently concluded fall conference on the Catholic imagination, and preview some exciting new initiatives at the Nicola Center. Let's sit down together for this delightful conversation. Well, Jenny Martin, welcome back to the podcast.
Thank you. It is my true delight to be here.
So let me begin by saying congratulations. Welcome to the Nicola Center as our director. Obviously, you've been connected for many years, but welcome to the directorship.
Thank you so much. It's been a real gift this last semester. So I appreciate all your hospitality and the whole staff. It's been really wonderful to be here.
Fantastic. Now, you've spoken in kind of published interviews about stepping into the directorship of the center, succeeding Carter Snead and David Solomon. And you've spoken in terms of the transcendentals of truth, goodness, and beauty. Can you maybe kind of unpack a little bit about that? Tell us about that.
Absolutely. So I think the most important thing about that metaphor or analogy is that despite different appearances, the transcendentals of the true, the good, and the beautiful are at bottom the same. They are identical. They are coincident. In very philosophical terms, they're convertible. That is, so if something is good and true, then it's beautiful, and if it's beautiful, then it's good and true. And so, one of the things that I like about that metaphor is that even though my predecessors, David Solomon and Carter Snead, have different approaches and different strengths and different research interests, we have David Solomon as a philosopher who did medical ethics, and we have Carter Snead as a lawyer who works in pro-life causes and in public policy, and then myself as a theologian and a humanist. And I think they can seem very different if you're not thinking about it very carefully. But I actually think David, it's a little funny, talking about him as being representative of the true and Carter as the good. And I guess that leaves me with beauty. It's a little awkward to talk about. But I think it's the thing that I appreciate about that is what I care very deeply about is making the Catholic intellectual and moral tradition compelling by the force of its own beauty, which in fact is its truth and its goodness. So really the metaphor is meant to show that that past, present, and future, all of the directors are engaged in the same work, right, of illuminating the centrality and the beauty of the Catholic intellectual and moral tradition.
Yeah. Well, in September, you gave an inaugural address as director of the center with a talk entitled, "What is Catholic Culture?" Now, your answer to that question, quoting your beloved Balthasar, was being Catholic means embracing everything and leaving nothing out. And you also drew upon Basil of Caesarea to emphasize that Catholic culture also holds some specific things as more true than others. And in the end, you proposed, in the vein of Joseph Pieper, one of my favorites, contemplation and worship of the Creator from our perspective as creatures as the ultimate expression of Catholic culture. So do you have some ideas of how the Nicola Center will concretize this within our mission to promote the Catholic moral and intellectual tradition?
Absolutely. That's a wonderful question. I think, as I think of it, the work of the Nicola Center is very much in line with the work of the university as a whole. And so a lot of my inspiration for that talk, I went back to kind of the fundamental, the mission statement of our university. And there in the mission statement, it says that a sacramental vision or a Catholic vision encounters God in the whole of creation. And that's really what I mean, I think, when Balthasar says being Catholic means embracing everything, leaving nothing out. You can see in this Catholic vision the way that God is working in culture, in persons, as the mission statement says, in events and in material things. But what's important is that even if the Catholic vision has this capaciousness, and it is obliged to the whole of human culture, there is also in our mission statement the very strong claim that a Catholic university has to draw its inspiration from Jesus Christ, who is the source of wisdom and the source of truth. Mm-hmm. And it's in Jesus Christ where all of those things are brought to completion, right? So there is, of course, free inquiry and open discussion and all these things. But what's really important, I think, about the theologians who have formed me so deeply, like John Henry Newman and Pope Benedict XVI, Newman has this idea of kind of integrated education, right? An idea of the university. It's like all of the disciplines have a place, but ultimately they are all find their union in Jesus Christ, who calls all things to himself. And right, I mean, at the end of the day, the search for truth, as Benedict says in his Introduction to Christianity, when we think about truth, it's not just he doesn't just say this is an objective thing. He says it's also personal. It is Jesus Christ who is the way, the truth, and the life. And not only is it objective, but it is a truth that knows me and loves me. And I think that, we are obliged to that very creative, very personal understanding of the truth. And so, given all of those kind of theological principles that I guess I'm operating under, I think a lot about how, as the Nicola Center for Ethics and Culture, can work to bring those things to expression, right? And I'm also very motivated by Ex Corde Ecclesiae about the Catholic University, right? How do we actually apply these kind of lofty principles about a sacramental imagination and this sort of like capaciousness, but also being obliged to the truth? Well, there's very practical ways of doing that, right? I think being strongly committed to Catholic principles and attitudes and positions, especially on questions of human dignity from conception and natural death, collaboration with our bishop. I mean, that's a very practical thing. I mean, but like working right. with Bishop Rhodes to think about like, what is it? What is a Catholic mission? How can we help to instantiate the Catholic mission of the University of Notre Dame in a way which is both generous, but also very exacting? A commitment, as we have done historically, to serve the most fragile and vulnerable, the most poor among us, and to help to create a campus culture that truly expresses a Catholic way of life. And so it's not just that it does Catholic things, but everything that we do has to express these kind of fundamental ideas about a Catholic way of life. So to me, we will continue at the dCEC to be committed to an interdisciplinary approach, right? I mean, so that's one of the things that I think is very important. I think of the programming we have going on. We support theologians and philosophers, but also people who work in economics, in science, in bioethics, in law, theology, literature, all of the philosophy, everything. And then the other thing that I think is really wonderful that we do is incorporate pastoral care for students and our faculty, right? We woven together the liturgical life and the scholarly life. If Christ is the truth who knows me and loves me, what better to do than to encounter Christ not only in our intellectual pursuits, but also in the Eucharist, right? So intellectually and Eucharistically. And I think if we can, as academics and as staff, as a center, if we can invite students into this vision that shows there is no competition between the highest possible degree of sophistication in our intellectual work and the highest possible commitment to our faith, that's a very compelling vision. And I think, the students need to see that kind of intellectual life, which is entirely faithful, is possible and desirable.
Yeah. That actually kind of reminds me of something that I think about a lot. You and I go to the same parish.
We do.
And I we're sitting up there in the balcony because it's the best possible,
it's the best possible seat.
Vantage point,
yeah.
Exactly. But I'm very conscious of the fact that you're a theologian, and theology is words about God, right? I mean, ultimately, what it means. But to be a practicing person of faith and a theologian, like, how does your prayer life emphasize and interact with your academic writing and research and publishing?
Yeah, words about God. But then you think about, the prologue to the Gospel of John, that the Word became flesh and dwelt among us, right? So those words can never exist in the abstract, right? The words of the Word of God in Christ is real and present to us. And so to me, that's the most enlivening thing about doing theology. It's not ever, thinking about something that is far away or is something that we don't have access to, but it's a great mystery that is at the same time most intimate to us. So I'm really compelled by theologians in the tradition like Augustine, or those who read Augustine, like not super well known, but this French oratorian called Alphonse Gratry, who wrote a book called The Wellsprings, which is a sort of precursor for Sertillange's intellectual life, which is more popular. But there he says, if you want the intellectual life, what you need to do is to listen to Christ, your teacher, who dwells in you, right? And so when you come to write, when you come to read, when you come to reflect, listen to that voice and trust that voice. And to me, like sometimes when I'm writing academic things, and they feel so far away, I try to do that and have a more contemplative approach and think like, what is that kind of truth that's welling up that I can trust and I know. So I think they're very deeply woven together, actually.
Yeah. Well, that's always good to hear too, because some can read theology and be led away from faith in some ways too, because that's the modern skeptic heart, right?
Right, exactly. Yeah. The theologians that I work on, like Hans Urs von Balthasar and Newman and Benedict, thankfully their work is very edifying as well as it is intellectually challenging.
Yeah. Well, that kind of naturally leads into a little bit about the fall conference, which we just concluded. When we first talked here for the podcast back in 2019, and I first met you, you were preparing to present at the Catholic Imagination Conference, which was hosted at Loyola University in Chicago. Now, fast forward to 2024, where the dCEC's annual fall conference was presented in collaboration with that Catholic Imagination Conference, but with our unique interdisciplinary flair that you've kind of referenced already that we're well known for. So what, from your perspective, were some of the highlights as the director who kind of inherited this in a way,
yes,
right?
Sure.
We were going to do it whether or not you were our director, but it worked out perfectly.
It was very providential. It really was. I was so enlivened by that conference. A lot of it, now that our videos are up, it's been so nice to be able to watch everything that I missed. And so some of the things, as I'm sort of, going around making sure everything is working smoothly, I was really impressed by really just the sort of performances in particular. I mean, I think that was such a nice thing that we did this year. Dana Gioia and J.J. Wright's collaboration on this kind of choral and jazz composition that we had really standing room only. I mean, I'm sure we were breaking all the fire cuts, but that was really a beautiful thing to see this sort of exuberant celebration of Catholic creativity. The poetry readings, I think, were really lovely. John Dean and Cyril O'Regan, I was very moved, shed several tears during that beautiful thing on as they were reading their poetry. The things on film and Flannery O'Connor. I think the Catholic Imagination Conference, I think it's in its 5th iteration, and we that one was our 24th. And so bringing together all of that wisdom, including, the more academic papers that we had, and the ones on, songwriting and, all of these different kinds of things makes me really excited to be part of this community. It was a real celebration of everything good and interesting about culture, and not just Catholic culture, right? It just sort of primarily, but not entirely exclusively.
Yeah. At the end of the conference, you stood up and you kind of spoke a little bit about next year's conference as well, and gave a little preview, at least, of the theme. So it won't be breaking any news
right.
to hear on the podcast. Tell us a little bit about the theme for 2025, because I know we're actually opening up the call for papers much earlier than we have in previous years. So there's going to be a lot of thought time.
Yes. So we're really excited about this. This is our 25th conference. And so, when we think about anniversaries and these kind of, our moments are very of temporal density, right? You think like, oh, where have we come? Where are we going? So there's this kind of idea of looking backward and looking forward at the same time at any anniversary. And so we decided on the theme Living Tradition, which it also gets at the idea that tradition is something that is lived, it's embodied in our practices. And so what I'm hoping will come of that is a just absolute extravaganza of different kinds of scholars and practitioners and artists and academics thinking about what does it mean to live tradition, right? I would love to have winemakers come and talk about soil and the sort of strata of the soil and the traditions of winemaking practices. And I would love to have people in law talk about how do you think about traditionalism? How do you think about applying those things? Theologians to talk about the durability of the tradition, which is going back to this live source of the revelation of Christ. What does that mean to have a tradition to where it's not just something in the past, but it's actually very live? I'm teaching a course now called Catholicism and Tradition with my colleague Tom Stapleford, and we are really thinking a lot about these questions of development of doctrine and how things have changed and how things stay the same and how we ought to interpret change and continuity in the church. And so this phenomenon of tradition, I think, is really interesting. The artists can come and think about artistic and literary traditions. There's so many opportunities, I think, for us to celebrate what is past at the same time that we understand it is animated by very live concerns and the people who embody those traditions. I think it's something that I find very intriguing as a researcher and also just as a person.
Sure. Yeah. No, lots of possibility. And it's funny you mentioned, performances and music. My mind immediately went to the fact that what's at the core of The Sound of Music, but a song about do, re, mi, which was invented by monks to talk about the scales.
Yes, that's right.
And so it's drawing from past, and of course, in the popular culture at the time, it's just kind of delightful.
It is delightful, absolutely. So I hope we get a lot of wonderful proposals. So let this be your invitation.
Indeed. Well, recently you were in Rome because your mentor and colleague Cyril O'Regan was honored with the Ratzinger Prize in Theology, a prize that gets called the Nobel Prize in Theology, really, in a way. This was Notre Dame's second recipient of the Ratzinger Prize with the great Brian
Daley,
SJ. So tell us a little bit about how Cyril has been an influence in your scholarly development, what the prize means, and what it meant to you to be in Rome there for the celebration.
So, I think of all of the professors at Notre Dame, I think Cyril has probably been the most formative on my way of thinking and my way of teaching too. Just to look at his CV is, it's really astonishing. His range of expertise is all over the map. He does John Henry Newman, but he does Jakob Burma, he does Irish literature, he does poetry, he writes poetry, he does Gnosticism, Balthasar, Blake, Hegel, Nietzsche, all of these things that he writes on. Plus the patristics and the medievals, right? So somehow or other, he has this very wide-angled approach to thinking about theology, right? It's not narrow, it's not constrictive, and he's extraordinarily creative. So I think that was very helpful for me to think about how someone can intervene in the field of contemporary theology in this very sort of generous way. The other thing I think I learned from Cyril was how to teach and how to advise. He's one of those very generous, brilliant, but also entirely self-effacing people who somehow bring out the best in their students and make the students think it was their idea all along. It's like, I'm giving you this gift, and then you give it back to him, and somehow it's yours, right? You've kind of he doesn't make his students identical repetitions of him, but you can see something, I think, in all of his students of this freshness and sort of originality. He gives you the freedom to be exactly yourself, the best version of yourself. And I think that's really lovely. Like when he's teaching, someone can ask a sort of middling to poor question, and he re-articulates it. He moves it 15 degrees to one way or the other, and suddenly it's brilliant. So it's there's a sort of generosity there. He's also a very practical person, very pastoral person, and he's been a wonderful mentor. And so it was my true delight when he was named he was given the Ratzinger Prize, which was based, of course, on a conference that we did here at the center in April, right? The Benedict Conference. We'd been collaborating with the foundation, the Ratzinger Foundation, in Rome, and they came and heard Cyril speak, and they said, "Who is this Cyril O'Regan? Yeah. He's amazing." So we were really happy to be able to make those connections. So as you already said, the Ratzinger Prize is sort of the biggest prize you can get in theology. It's the Nobel Prize of theology, and it's given to scholars or artists who have, as they say, a particular merit in the activity of publication or scientific research. So, I mean, Cyril certainly has that. But it was a real gift to be there. It truly was. I think one of the sort of most meaningful moment in Rome. Well, there are two things: a funny thing and then a meaningful thing. Early in the morning, we are ushered to St. Peter's Basilica, and we go in before it's even open. And so it's still dark as we're walking in there, and we go in and we see, of course, all of the beautiful art in there. We see the Pietà, we see the chair of St. Peter, we see it all. And then we go down the stairs to the Vatican grottos, where we have a mass set up right in front of Peter's sepulcher, and then all around us are the tombs of the popes. All of that history and heritage right there. There are two open pews in the front for the honorees, and of course Cyril is so Cyril that he goes all the way back to the back of the room and sits in one of the folding chairs because he can't possibly assume that chair in the front is for him. I mean, that was very much, and of course we make him sit in the front, make him accept his glory. But so that I thought was really kind of sweet and exactly him. And then after the Mass, we all processed around the corner to Benedict's tomb and sang the Salve Regina together. And this is a small, like 20, 30 people maybe, and pray at his tomb. And for someone, I became Catholic the year that Benedict became Pope, and so to me, we've always been sort of closely allied. I learned to be Catholic from Pope Benedict. I read Introduction to Christianity and thought, how can someone write like this? How can someone get everything so exactly right, and invite me into this way of thinking that is so interesting and sophisticated? So yeah, it was a really extraordinarily meaningful thing. Yeah. Yeah. We also ate a lot of pasta, a lot of pizza, and had a lot of wine. So it was a great trip.
There are worse ways to celebrate.
That's right. Indeed.
How fun. Well, tell us a little bit about some of the projects and initiatives that are on the horizon here at the Nicola Center.
Of course. So we have some things that, we're very good at the fall conference, and that, of course, is ongoing. We do the book that changed my life, or the Soren Fellows. We do the Bread of Life dinner, all of those things, the Evangelium Vitae Award and dinner, the Vita Institute, all of those things are going strong, and we are so excited about this year's winner, Tony and Phyllis Loinger. They've done such good work on behalf of life issues over the course of their whole careers. We have some sort of new things that I guess are reflective of some of my own particular interests. We're launching a Dante Among Theologians International Consortium with cooperation at the Global Gateway in London with Vittorio Montemaggi and George Corbett at St. Andrews University. And so it'll be thinking about Dante in the context of his own moment, right? So thinking about Dante with Aquinas, Dante with Bonaventure, Dante with Anselm, but also Dante as received by contemporary theologians now. So how do we read Dante as a transformative figure, not only for professional theologians, but everyone who is a believer of goodwill, who wants to think about the human condition and the ways in which we unmake ourselves with sin and are remade by the grace of God. I mean, it's a lovely. We hope to bring Dante at a lot of different levels to an interdisciplinary audience and invite postdocs eventually into this space where we can really read Dante in an interdisciplinary way, not in a kind of silo where Italian studies or literature or theology, but how can we all get together and talk in an interdisciplinary way about Dante and have some public-facing popular things as well to make Dante more accessible. We're also doing a conference on John Henry Newman in March. I've been working on his cause for Doctor of the Church, and so I hope that goes forward, working on the Positio paper for that. So we will have a conference on Newman, thinking about Newman and all, especially with reference to Hans Urs von Balthasar on aesthetics and epistemology and other things as well. Their engagement with Victorian poetry. There's a lot of really exciting things on the horizon for that. Faith and Reason. We have something else I'm really excited about. We're doing a conference on prenatal diagnoses, trisomy 13, in cooperation with the diocese. So that's going to have pastoral implications. It's called The Changing Face of Life-Limiting Prenatal Diagnoses, Clinical, Pastoral, and Ethical Considerations. So that's on the books. It's going to be great. And then many of our ongoing collaborations will still be ongoing. Stanford's Boundaries of Humanity project. We've got some new collaborations on the horizon as well, working with the Vatican on AI. Their working group is going to come in July, and we'll be working with the Secretary for the Dicastery of Culture and Education. We have some really exciting people coming in the spring. A Rhodes Scholar who's going to be doing a film series for us, yes. Which is super exciting, and some very early collaborative projects on art and film and sainthood that we are currently have cooking. Cool. So lots of fun things on the horizon.
Yeah, delightful. Well, how about you professionally? What are you working on?
Let's see. I've got a couple of essays in the hopper now. I was asked to be part of a really interesting project on the spiritual senses, but the spiritual senses in modern literature. So my contribution is going to be on David Jones, the Catholic poet and artist, who is entirely interesting. He wrote this very beautiful essay called Art and Sacrament, which I find really inspiring. He's inspired by Jacques Maritain, who, of course, we have the center here. So I'll be writing on spiritual senses in some of David Jones's art and poetry and woodcuts. I'm also working on a piece that's nearly done on theological style, where I'm using John Henry Newman and Joseph Ratzinger and sort of correlating them as Augustinian. So thinking about their style as being respectively Augustinian. And I've got a couple of other smaller things in the works as well. So it's fun. It's been nice this kind of work at the center has really fed into the kinds of things that I'm interested in researching. And so it's been a mutually beneficial kind of symbiosis of this kind of work that we do that's public facing and my own scholarship. So it's a great fit.
Although it sounds as though there may be not a moment of rest.
Not a single one. Because I also have 3 kids and one of them's going off to college, and it's a full court press all the time.
Sure. Well, Jenny, welcome to the center. Welcome to this crazy
thing we're doing.
Ongoing, nonstop life. But no, it's been fantastic, and all of those initiatives we're excited to talk. We'll bring a number of the people that are involved in those. We'll bring them here to the studio and have a chat with them too. So,
that's so great. It's been such a pleasure to chat with you, Ken, here and there and always. So
awesome. Well, thank you kindly.
Thank you very much.
Thank you to Professor Jenny Martin. In the show notes, you will find links to her inaugural director's lecture, a playlist of videos from our 2024 Fall Conference, and our calendar of upcoming events on the dCEC website. Subscribe to Ethics and Culture Cast so that you can always get the latest episodes by visiting ethicscenter.nd.edu/podcast. We would love your feedback. Please review the show on iTunes, Google Play, or wherever you get your podcasts, and email your suggestions to cecpodcast@nd.edu. Our theme music is I Don't Know by Grapes, licensed under the Creative Commons Attribution License. We'll see you next time on Ethics and Culture Cast. Until then, make good decisions.